Hi, this is Mary Hood again. Today's topic, I've been asked several times by a number of different people to talk about the subject of how do you handle your toddlers running around when you're trying to homeschool your older children. Now, I'll be honest, I have hesitated to do this video for a number of reasons. First of all, there are so many variables. I can't possibly address them all, and every single family is different, all right? In my case, my oldest son was 12 when I had my youngest son. I had 5 kids, but there are people I know that have 5 kids when the oldest is 6 when they have their youngest, so sometimes they have a lot that are right the same age group. Some of you may have 2 or 3 teenagers and then a late born child or an adopted child who's still a toddler. Some of you may have a 3-year-old and a 12-year-old. And of course, there are personality differences. Some children are just easier than others, and some children are just very, very difficult to control when they're that age. So there are so many variables. I even hesitated to just try to approach the topic. I certainly don't want you to think that I have it all together in this area or that I know exactly what I should tell you in order to make your life perfect. But I can tell you a few pointers, and the first is don't try to make your life perfect. It doesn't work anyway, and you need to beat yourself up a little less. Remember that teachers have lots of interruptions also. All right, they just have different types of ones. So if you're trying to get something accomplished and some little 3 or 4-year-old keeps running in the room, don't feel like the world is going to end. I don't have toddlers right now, but I have dogs. And I would be very, very surprised if one of them doesn't start barking in the middle of this this little video I'm making. You just have to learn to live with the interruptions and do the best you can. And that's what teachers in a schoolroom do too anyway. So just remember that. The other source of my hesitation to do one is that it's been many years since I've been in your situation. However, I remember it. And as an older woman, of course, I remember those days with a great deal more fondness than I probably thought of them when I was in that situation. So, I know that it can be tough, but I also know that someday you really will think back on this and think it was the best years of your life. So try to remember that, but also remember that when people like me tell you that, it's easy for us to remember the good stuff and forget the bad stuff. So it's just know that you're doing the best you can, and that's all anybody can expect of you. All right. So it's not going to be perfect. All right. The second main point that I want to make is that the more you are a relaxed homeschooler, the more you do things family style, the easier it's going to be to incorporate your toddlers into whatever you're doing. All right, if you're trying to sit there for 4.5 hours a day at a kitchen table with academic workbooks, especially if it's in a situation where you feel you have to supervise that type of instruction, then no, you're not going to be able to also handle your toddlers at the same time. It just doesn't work that well. But just take one subject, for example, science, all right? You could do science. Let's say you have a 10 or 11 or 12-year-old, and they're supposed to be doing science, and you want to do it using some curriculum. It's got some workbooks, some textbooks, some, experiments or whatever, all right? But remember, too, that life is long and things can happen later if they can't happen right now. Maybe right now it would work better to have your science be based in the garden or something outside, some kind of outdoor experiences. And if you do that, then often the toddlers can kind of come along for the ride and find ways to help and enjoy themselves while you're doing it in the out of doors. And then maybe your older kids can come back in and do a little bit of writing or make a little notebook or something that goes along with it, or read a few library books or something and make it a little more academic. But again, you don't have to take every single subject and try to do it at the kitchen table using a workbook textbook approach, because it's virtually impossible to do that unless you have some help of some kind when you have a bunch of little ones running around too. So the more you can be relaxed family style, the better you're probably going to find things work. Now, to me, the heart of academics is reading to children, especially up to about the age of 12. So you have to figure out a way to make reading time work. Now, for some people, it might work best if you just wait until it's nap time for some little child. That never really worked for me because our nap times were often few and far between, and I wanted to have reading time 2 or 3 times a day at least. So I had to find a way of having little kids sort of busy in the background. Now, little kids can learn some boundaries. They can learn things like you can play with your Legos, you can play with your trucks. You can't come over here and disturb me right now, and you have to keep it a little on the quiet side. If my dogs can learn that, your toddlers can learn that. All right. Now, again, it's very easy for me to be judgmental sitting over here on this side of the screen. All right. And if they have to come up and bounce in your lap, then try to, or if you have a baby, you might be, I remember many times nursing a baby while I was reading a story to my older kids, or trying to have a toddler sit next to me. It's just that as you make the reading level a little more difficult, if you have, say, a 10, 11, 12-year-old and you're reading to them, you're probably not reading easy stories with pictures, so it might be harder for the toddler to just cooperate by just sitting on the couch. Now, somebody on here who I've asked to maybe do a video on this someday, was talking about busy bags the other day. Something, basically, think of a bag or a box or something, little carton, that has some things in it that the toddlers really enjoy playing with, and they're only allowed to play with it during a particular time, like when you're reading to the older children. So you might want to try that. Sometimes some little kids like to color, if you have some coloring books and so forth. But again, I know a 2-year-old, they're going to be coloring, and then they're going to be running over to try to show it to you. And again, just like my dog's barking in the middle of this video, sometimes just a slight interruption can be tolerated. But again, you need to learn to gradually help them to understand that there are certain boundaries to their behavior during reading time, because that really, like I said, is the heart of it. Now, another thing, and by the way, as far as what to put in those busy bags, that entirely depends on you, your level of messiness, the place you have, little cardboard type books that they can look at themselves, puzzles, like I said, things to draw in, paper and crayons and what have you, or Legos or anything else that they might like to do. And again, this is so individual to the little child, but if you can just have something that you only bring out when you're trying to have that little bit of reading time. And of course, you can use the same technique if you're trying to do some workbook activity with one of your older kids. It's just, I don't know how well that's going to work. For one thing, I don't have a lot of experience with that. Now, the other part of this is managing what's going on around you, if you will. And again, this is so dependent on the exact age of your children. When I had little kids, I often also had an older one. So it would be very common for me to ask one of my older kids to watch one of my younger kids for a little while I worked with a different one of the older kids, or one of the middle kids or whatever, and then switch up, and have the other child have a little bit of one-on-one time with me while the other one was watching the little ones or so forth. Again, you have to, obviously exercise a lot of safety issues here. When I had an actual nursing baby, that nursing baby was almost always right there with me. I wouldn't have a 12-year-old, for example, in charge of a nursing baby, at least not for very long, or not unless, I was right there also. But there are times when that kind of thing works well. Another possibility is to have a older teenager, possibly a homeschooling teenager, come in 1 or 2 times a week, preferably to work with your play with your younger children while you have a little time one-on-one with the older ones. All right. And when you're talking about older kids, also by the age of 12 or so, most older kids should be able to do a lot of their work independently with just a little bit of help from you. So that might help as well. And again, it so much depends on your exact age ranges and their personalities. Now, let's talk about the really crazy toddler. We all have one of those sometimes. All right. Just a couple pointers. Again, I'm not saying I have all the answers, because I sure don't. But one thing, look at their diet a little bit, because I know that there are certain things like red food coloring and sugar, both of which are components of a popular drink that people give to their little toddlers once in a while. Things like that, a lot of sugar or something, will send them bouncing right off the wall. The second thing is to think about the time of day again. There are certain times that your little children will have more ability to fend for themselves, and other times when they're tired or when they're hungry that they're just not going to be able to. And we all know that from our many trips to the grocery store, that there are certain times of day we had to time that, or it just wasn't going to happen. And of course, there's a possibility of working with your older kids while your toddler is down for a nap. Now, I highly recommend nap time extends all the way up to they're 5 or 6 years old, or maybe even beyond. However, the nature of nap time changes. At some points, it's very much regulated when they're very little by their own cycle, you know. And so you can't really tell a 3-year-old this is your nap time. You kind of have to adjust the rest of the family around that 3-year-old's nap time. But then as they get a little older and don't need nap time so much anymore, it can still be required that they spend an hour in their rooms being quiet. And at some point that becomes playing with puzzles, you know, reading books or something. The biggest issue here, though, for me is when they're doing that, you should really be having quiet time yourself, you know. And so many mothers, when they finally figure out a way to have an hour of quiet time, that's when they go do all their housework and the work with the older kids and all that sort of thing. And I think you have to really watch it, because I've done a lot of videos and so forth on the mom's role in all this, but you have to watch your own health and happiness and everything you need. And you need that quiet time, whether it's to read a book or just sit and regroup or have a little Bible study or actually fall asleep. You know, you need that. So I would be very careful about using that particular time of day to catch up on all the stuff you want to do with your older kids. All right. Now, the other thing is, of course, screen time. Now, I am not a fan of plunking down kids in front of computers, computer games, videos, and all that sort of thing. Back in my day, we didn't really have that, but we did, of course, have television. And I would use the carefully chosen TV show once in a while when I just had to have a way of occupying somebody's time. And again, you do what you have to do, all right? But if you're going to use screen time of any type, just make sure that it's minimal and it's well chosen, because a poorly chosen TV, video, whatever, can actually wind them up even more and make it harder for them to deal with after the thing is over. But there's certainly a time and a place to have a well-chosen DVD. These days, I would be very careful about actually putting them in front of the actual TV screen, because even if you have a well-chosen TV show, you never know what's going to pop up on the commercials. But the library has a lot of good DVDs, and as a Charlotte Mason advocate, you know, I would hope you would try to find things that were worthwhile and not what I would call twaddle, what Charlotte Mason calls twaddle, so that you can find, just an example from my own day, Mr. Rogers was a very good TV show. A lot of people laughed at it, but he was very calm and quiet and talked to the children, you know, and had good quality entertainment on it. He had real jazz musicians come on and so forth. So he was a good thing, as opposed to something like that was more flashy, you know, and little tidbits of this and that and lots of cartoon and all that sort of thing. So if you're going to choose things to occupy your toddlers while you're doing this, and of course, you have to still have some safety things. If you get very, very, very involved in what you're doing and you have a toddler in another room, watching a screen of some kind, that can be dangerous. You know, they may not stay watching the screen. They might get up and do something else that might not be a good thing. So you just have to be a little bit careful with all of that. Now, as I said in the beginning, I don't have all the answers. It's so dependent. You just have to sort of experiment with what works for your family. But above all, remember that there are things more important than the academics you're doing. If you're trying to do all this academics, but in the process you're getting cranky and you're yelling at them and all that, you know, you have to be careful with that, because the character building is so much more important than the specific academics you're doing. And like I said, up to the age of 12, frankly, if you just read to them a lot and have, you know, a quality life with a lot of interesting experiences, you know, the rest of it could wait. If whatever doesn't happen can happen a little later. Of course, you have to know the laws of your state and so forth, and make sure that you comply enough with what you're supposed to be doing. But most people are still trying too hard to make it look like a school setting. And like I said, the more you look like a school setting, the harder it's going to be to deal with your toddlers. All right, I hope this has been of some help to you. Like I said, I know some of you probably were hoping for a lot more specific suggestions, and I will try to get somebody with younger children to come on here one of these days and do one for you. But for me, it's more general guidelines, and again, the more relaxed you can be, and the more you can understand child development. If you don't really know a lot about child development, I highly recommend you learn something about it. I do have one MP3 series, four MP3s about developmental issues. The first one, I think, is babies and toddlers, and then preschoolers, and then primary, and then elementary school. Right now, the only way you might be able to get a hold of that would be by emailing me at mary.e.hood@gmail.com. And even then, I'm not positive I can get them to you because I've gotten rid of a lot of things recently, like the website and my send this file subscription and so forth. But I believe I could figure out a way to get them to you if you were interested in that. Just email me and tell me what you're interested in. Same thing with any of my books, booklets, what have you. Now, if you're interested in this, I would really appreciate you subscribing. There's going to be a little subscribe button in the bottom of the YouTube video. And also on Facebook, we have a Facebook group called Relaxed Homeschooling with Mary Hood. So I hope that that you stick with us. If you're interested, I also have a book written about a year ago that it was meant for the newer people called The Relaxed Homeschooler Rides Again, and that's available on Amazon as either an ebook or a paperback. All right, that's it for today. I'm about to go to Cumberland Island, one of my favorite places in the world. So someday I'll probably do one of these on doing outdoor experiences with your children. Sometimes I beat myself up a little bit for not doing more camping and all that sort of thing with my kids when they're little. But then I remember, man, I had 5 of them. It's pretty hard to go camping with 5 children in tow. But when I see the people out there with them, I sure do appreciate the fact that they're getting their kids out into nature. And if I don't get eaten by an alligator or anything like that, I'll be back here next week with another video. Thanks a lot and have a good time. Bye.